Lunch, because I do want to make sure that every speaker has exactly the same amount of time to speak. And so I'm immediately going to introduce our next speaker, who's going to be talking on black seafarers, servicemen and workers and the struggle to survive. Co-director of Writing on the Wall, can you please welcome Madeline Heneghan.
Thank you. I just need to grab some water. It was my birthday yesterday, so consequently I'm a little bit dehydrated today. No, that was yesterday. You missed it. But nevertheless, I'm delighted to be here and to be able to share with you exciting news of... there we are. Exciting news of a heritage project that is funded by Heritage Lottery and that we're about to embark on at Writing on the Wall. If you don't know Writing on the Wall, we're a writing development organisation. We're part of the Arts Council's national portfolio. We deliver creative writing projects in communities. We hold an annual writing festival every May, and we brought some amazing thinkers, writers, performers to the city over the years. People like Benjamin Zephaniah, Linton Kwesi Johnson, Darcus Howe, Bonnie Greer. And in June, we're so proud to be bringing US crime writer Walter Mosley to the city as part of... Yes, I did say Walter Mosley. As part of the City of Liverpool's celebrations of the 175th anniversary of the Cunard Line, and we're all going to be going America crazy. So that's some of what Writing on the Wall does, but we've also run a host of heritage projects relating to the history of the black and the white working class. And our most recent, that's just coming to a conclusion, is the George Garrett Archive project. And I'll say a little bit about that later because it is relevant to the work that we're going to be doing. But this archive is based on a collection of papers, largely letters, that were brought to us by a community member called Joe Farag. People will know Joe Farag from Liverpool. And because of the work that we've done with the George Garrett Archive, he brought us this phenomenal collection of letters that are pertaining to the plight of servicemen, seafarers and black workers in that post-war period. I'm sure you will know that, the First World War brought huge changes for the black working class, both in Britain and abroad. With the wartime boom, they were welcomed into the workforce, welcomed into the Navy, welcomed into the armed forces. But as soon as armistice was declared, that welcome was pretty swiftly withdrawn. And so we had a situation, and last year with the commemorations of the First World War, there was a lot of attention, and rightly so, given to the contribution of black troops, black sailors, seafarers to the war effort. But little has been done around what became of these men once they ceased to be useful to the establishment, really. And so the letters are pertaining to black workers who suddenly had come to fill the gaps in the factories. Suddenly the colour bar goes up, and also soldiers and sailors demobbed here on the promise of employment, but that employment never came. So we have, the estimates are that there was 20,000 black people living in England post First World War and 5,000 in Liverpool. And a large majority of those were left destitute. Some had been here prior to the war and had families to support. So that's the kind of period. And of course, it's the period that that's got the 1919 riots happening at that time. Of course, we all know about Charles Wotton in Liverpool. We had the fabulous Charles Wotton Education Centre, and he was a seafarer who, during those riots, was chased by a white angry mob and ran into the river and then was stoned to death. So we know about Charles Wotton, but when I started to dig into this period, I was actually shocked at the level of violence. Descriptions at the time, which you can find in Peter Fryer, Ray mentioned, that's a fantastic book. Descriptions at the time talk about white mobs, 2,000 strong, attacking black boarding houses, attacking individuals in the street. So many of those people who were under attack found themselves taking shelter in the bridewells, or the police stations as they were called, bridewells at that time. So the focus of today, I've given you a bit of a background to the archive, but the focus of today is not really about the archive, but actually what we're going to do with it. But it is, it's a fantastic collection, so I've just picked out a few samples of things to kind of give you an idea. I don't expect you to be able to read these, but I just want you to kind of get a flavour for it, see what it actually looks like. And this is a letter from the Lord Mayor to the Lord Mayor of Liverpool to the Secretary of State at the Colonial Office. And it's dated 1919, just 1 month before the race riots that occurred. And he is concerned at the situation, and he is suggesting that the government should pay a £5, should repatriate these black men and workers and servicemen, but also to send them home with £5 in their pockets. One problem was not everybody wanted to go home because they had families, they had settled here, but also the government said, no, we can't afford that, this is your problem. So, and there's a lot of letters from the Mayor's office petitioning for this, repatriation, this solution that was going to bring an end to the racial violence as the Mayor's office saw it. This is an interesting one. This is a kind of postcard that is sent by a manufacturer of sweets, and it's an outrage at the situation, actually. So there was within white communities, there was sympathy and support for those black workers, although, the Seamen's Union certainly was in favour of the colour bar, as I'm sure Ray can expand on a lot more. But there were pockets of support from white Liverpudlians, and this one is really saying, it's a terrible situation, and that these people have fought in the war for God, Queen and country, so to speak. Okay, and this is a letter of outrage from the Presbyterian Church that is saying, the situation, the violence, the race riots is really, an indictment on the city of Liverpool. And this is, again, a letter from the Town Hall to the Secretary of State, and it talks about three West African men who have been assaulted, and really is laying the blame for the situation at the door of central government for failing to take any responsibility. And the next few slides that are going to come up, are really the gems of this collection. What we have is the words of the men themselves. Often black communities are written about, and we very rarely hear from the subject, so to speak. But what we have in this collection is letters from the men themselves, heartbreaking actually, but very articulate, and they really give a flavour of the situation. And this one is described how he arrived in Liverpool after serving time in the desert. He then went to Russia because that's what he'd heard, they needed troops in Russia, and then he finds himself destitute in Liverpool. And he does have work, but he can't afford to get his civilian clothes. Well, there's a possibility that he might get a job, but he can't afford to get his civilian clothes out of the pawn shop. And it's this level of detail that's absolutely fascinating and quite common, actually, that this is how people were surviving, was by pawning their personal belongings. And this is a letter from an Indian guy who served in the army, and he is saying, we have the same government, but I am left here. He's got a wife and child, and he's destitute. And again, housed in the Bridewell because of the level of violence. And again, this is kind of a petition from the African churches. So we've got advocates within this collection. We've got the Ethiopian Church. This is a conglomerate of African churches who are really detailing the situation and calling on the local mayor's office to do something about it. And this is most interesting. This is a list of names and addresses, and we really feel, relevant to Jeffrey's talk, we really feel that this gives the potential for our local community to trace their ancestors. If not the men that are listed here, it's got a full list, and it breaks it down into those who have served, those who have got wives and children here. And so we think that this will really motivate people to research that period for themselves, not just the men who are listed, but also their own relatives who might have been in this situation at the time. Because these documents, really, we view them as key to understanding Liverpool's history, the Liverpool 8 history, really, which is, for those of you who are not from Liverpool, is where the majority of our black community is housed, it resides. That's beginning to change slightly, but still that is where the majority of the communities are, and that is where the men were settling around Pitt Street area, but also moving into the Liverpool 8 area as we know it today. So we feel this is really an important and valuable part of our Liverpool black history, really. So that's the archive, but why it is so significant is how we are going to use it, and it's not going to just sit there or be in the library. We're really going to engage community members with history using the archive. And I mentioned the George Garrett project, and we developed a model of community engagement around history with the George Garrett, around heritage, if you like, and historic materials with this George Garrett project. George was a 1920s, 1930s seafarer and writer and left-wing activist. And his grandsons actually came to Writing on the Wall with an old battered suitcase that contained his original manuscripts, his seafaring documents, fantastic stuff. But more so, what is significant about the project is that 16 volunteers were recruited to that, and they were the ones that catalogued, digitised and have preserved that archive for future use. Next week it's going to be kind of officially handed over by the family members to the Central Library, and Central Library actually have been very, very supportive in this project, and we're going to enjoy their support again. Also, National Museums Liverpool will be supporting us in that they will help people to understand how they can trace their family history. So they'll support us again on the Black Heritage Project. Also with this, we've staged 2 of George Garrett's plays. There's a travelling installation that you might see around the city that looks a bit like a bow of a ship, and it's got heritage materials in it. That pops up in all kinds of places. And we made a film which was narrated by Alexi Sale. So it's this kind of model and level of engagement that we're seeking to replicate, if you like, on the archive project. When we were first given this body of documents, it was just before our Writing on the Wall festival last May, so we quickly just put up an impromptu display of the photocopies in Toxteth, using photocopies in Toxteth Library, and we commissioned local poet Levi Tafari to give us a creative response really to this archive, and he produced a collection of poems, and in Toxteth we had an event, a public event in Toxteth Library that Levi and I delivered, and the response from the community was phenomenal. The library was packed out. When we said we hope to do something with this project, people were just leaving their names and addresses to get involved. So there will be, what we're going to do with it is there will be a 16-week talk course, not just on this period, but really setting this post-war period into the context of Liverpool, the development of Liverpool's black community over time. There will be a publication, and there'll be a creative element to this project in that we will be inviting community members to give their creative response to this, and Levi Tafari will lead those sessions. So we've got a lot. It's a 17-month project. It's about to start. There are our details, and you know, if you're based in Liverpool and at all interested, please do get in touch, because we're starting to recruit for that project now. Thank you.
Thank you. To clarify then, the archive, you're in the process of digitising it now?
No.
So
well,
it's all hard copies still?
It's all hard copies. It needs to be catalogued, it needs to be preserved, and we will have the training from the library in order to make that happen. And it will all go on a dedicated website to the project.
Is all this held at Toxteth Library at the moment?
No, it's held in our office under lock and key at the moment.
So how accessible is it, or when do you think it can be accessible?
It's not accessible yet, and that is the whole point of the project, in that we will recruit community members to go through that process of cataloguing, archiving, preserving, digitising. They will learn a whole range of skills from doing that. But also raise awareness of the existence, and then it will go into Central Library and it will be publicly available. And we'll have exhibitions that again will travel around the city. Yeah, we're really excited about it, and we hope you are too.
Well, perhaps the most important question then at this point is, do you have the resources and the funding necessary to complete the project?
Yes.
That's refreshing.
Yeah.
And unusual.
Yeah. And I just want to say, it's kind of, you know, it opens up debate about the use of archives as social engagement, but also in these times of extreme cuts to public services, this is a really valuable model for preserving heritage materials, really. We'll do it ourselves.
I can't find a network connection.
Shut up. So yeah, so there is the funding from Heritage Lottery to run a 17-week 17-month project which will have a whole range of elements to it.
So again then, do please contact Madeline if you want to be involved with this project. We've certainly got time for a couple more questions. Yes, this gentleman here and then the gentleman at the back.
Congratulations, first of all. I mean, this goes back to the first point. Someone was saying, I mean, I know where the archive from, I know Joe very well.
We don't ask where Joe got it from. Yeah. I mean, we will be talking about on that 16-week course, we will be talking about the development of that community, of Liverpool's black community, really, in its entirety.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline. I really thoroughly enjoyed your talk. I've been reading some of the governmental archives around this period of the riots in 1919, and I don't know how much of the archive you've read yourself, but the official version, if you like, says that the authorities were acting to defend the jobs of returning British seafarers, and therefore they had to deport to protect. They had to deport a large number of African seamen to protect the jobs of returning British servicemen. And another, if you read some of the newspaper articles, it says about the threat to what seems society, like white women and black men mixing together. And I just wondered, through reading some of the archives, whether you were able to get a sense of what the British government were trying to achieve, particularly in deporting seamen back to the colonies, in particular West Africa.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was at all out of sympathy for those seafarers. And there's an actual document that the mayor is explaining to central government that he's had a deputation of white workers come to him and they're bemoaning the presence of black workers in the sugar refineries and on the ports, and he's sympathising with them. So yeah, I don't think it's really about the, you know, for the good of the black workers who were here at all. And when you read the news, you know, what you're saying about black men and white women, when you read the newspaper reports at the time, that is certainly what the media are whipping up. There's, again, in Peter Fryer, there's sections from the Liverpool Courier, I think it was at the time, and they're talking about shadowy figures in boarding houses and really like making it sound really seedy, and then white women. And so, yeah, I think whether the government were particularly concerned about that, I don't know, but it was something the media most certainly were whipping up. I haven't seen you for a long time.
We may have time for one more question, even though the bell is tolling. If anybody does have a question they want to ask.
I've got a point to make.
Sure, Jeffrey, go ahead.
In the Colonial Office files, at the time after the 1919 riots here, when the Canadians killed a policeman down in Epsom and all the other riot going on, they were concerned about huge numbers of ex-servicemen arriving back in the colony. And I think it was the Barbados people said, we can only take 100 at a time because there aren't jobs. And there was a suggestion maybe some of these people could be put in the police force. But if you can imagine 3,000 people turning up in Trinidad, or 5,000 people, a troop ship, unloading in Kingston, Jamaica in 1919 when the economy was fucked, there must have been a huge amount of pressure on people not to be thrown out of Liverpool. And I don't know whether the people in Liverpool were aware that their homelands didn't want to see them.
Right, okay, that's interesting. And yeah, I wasn't aware of that, and something we'll look into while we're... go on, Ray.
They didn't guess.
No, I know.
People didn't guess.
No. And, well, central government were basically saying Liverpool has to foot the bill, and Liverpool were like, well, we can't afford it. Yeah. Yeah.
On that note, I'd like to thank Madeline and Jeffrey again for excellent presentations.